Lee, a young father of 25, carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. He loved his 4 children more than anything. Van, the eldest at 7, always curious; Andrea, 6, a whirlwind of energy; Victoria, 5, her father's little shadow; and Paisley Jr., his 3-year-old princess. His love for his wife, Paisley, 35, burned just as bright, though dimmed by the constant worry for her health. Paisley suffered from a myriad of health issues, leaving her often bedridden and reliant on Lee. Lee worked tirelessly to provide for his family. He juggled multiple jobs, his days a blur of exhaustion and determination. He yearned for a normal life, a moment to catch his breath, but his responsibilities never allowed for it. His heart ached for Paisley, for their children, for the life they deserved. He knew he was their only hope, their anchor in the storm. Despite the hardships, Lee never let his children see his despair. He greeted each day with a smile, his heart filled with love for his boisterous, energetic children. He was their protector, their provider, their constant. He would move mountains for them, fight tooth and nail to ensure their happiness. Little did he know, the fight for their family was just beginning. Life with 4 young children was never easy, especially with Paisley's fluctuating health. There were good days, filled with laughter and simple joys. Days when Paisley's smile outshone the pain and Lee dared to hope. But these were often overshadowed by the bad days, the days that chipped away at their fragile stability. One afternoon, chaos erupted in the kitchen. Lee, momentarily distracted, heard a crash. He turned to find Andrea perched precariously on the counter, reaching for a cookie jar. Panic surged through him as he rushed to her, scooping her into his arms. "Daddy, cookie!" she squealed, oblivious to the fear that had gripped Lee's heart. Another day at the park, a similar wave of terror washed over him. He had taken his eyes off Victoria for a moment, distracted by a crying Paisley Jr. He found Victoria at the top of the slide, her small frame teetering dangerously. His heart pounded as he raced towards her, catching her just as she slipped. Then came the night Paisley slipped in the bathroom. Lee, alerted by a thud and her cries for help, found her sprawled on the floor. Despair washed over him as he helped her up, his own exhaustion forgotten in the face of her pain. He knew he couldn't do it all, be everything to everyone, but the thought of failing them was unbearable. It was a Tuesday, the sky heavy with the threat of rain, when Lee's world truly shifted on its axis. He had just returned home from his night shift, his body screaming for rest. He found 2 social workers at his doorstep, their faces grim, their presence sending a chill down his spine. "Mr. Walker?" one of them asked, her voice devoid of warmth. Lee's gut clenched. "Yes? We're here from Child Protective Services," the other woman said. "We've received a report about your children's well-being." Lee's heart hammered in his chest. A report? His children? What could they possibly have been told? He invited them in, his mind racing, fear mingling with confusion. He answered their questions honestly, explaining Paisley's condition, his struggles to balance work and family. He showed them the children's rooms, neat and tidy, toys put away. He explained the incident with Andrea on the counter, the close call at the park. He held nothing back, convinced that his love for his children, his unwavering dedication was evident. He was wrong. The social workers, their faces impassive, deemed his home unsafe. They spoke of neglect, of potential hazards, their words like venom seeping into the cracks of Lee's carefully constructed life. Before he could fully comprehend what was happening, they were ushering his children out the door, their small faces etched with confusion and fear. "Daddy!" Victoria cried, reaching for him, her bottom lip trembling. "It's okay, baby," Lee choked out, his voice thick with unshed tears. "It's going to be okay. Daddy's going to fix this." But as he watched the car pull away, his children's faces shrinking in the distance, a chilling realization washed over him. He was trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare, a system that seemed determined to punish him for his circumstances, his love, and his dedication. The days that followed were a blur of anguish and anger. He hired a lawyer, a ray of hope in the darkness, and fought tooth and nail to get his children back. He attended court hearings, his heart breaking each time he saw his children, their faces growing thinner, their smiles fading with each passing day. He was accused of neglect, his love for his children questioned, his every action scrutinized. The system designed to protect had become his tormentor, tearing his family apart. The legal battle was a grueling marathon. Lee, drained and exhausted, clung to the hope of reuniting with his children. He worked tirelessly, attending every court-ordered parenting class, every home visit, his every action under a microscope. His lawyer, a seasoned veteran of the family court system, became his confidant, his advocate, his lifeline. She saw the love Lee had for his children, the despair in his eyes, the fire that burned within him to make things right. "Don't give up, Lee," she'd say, her voice firm yet kind. "They need you. Fight for them." And fight he did. He jumped through every hoop, met every requirement, his resolve fueled by the memory of his children's faces. He knew he had to prove himself, not just to the court, but to himself. He was their father, their protector, and he would not let them down. Finally, after months of agonizing separation, the day of the custody hearing arrived. The courtroom was a cold, sterile space, the air thick with tension. Lee sat on one side, his lawyer beside him, his heart pounding in his chest. Across from him sat Paisley, her face pale and drawn. She had been called as a witness, her testimony crucial to the case. As Paisley took the stand, her voice was small, hesitant. She spoke of Lee's long hours, his exhaustion, painting a picture of a man overwhelmed, unable to cope. Then came the accusation that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. He hurt her," Paisley whispered, her eyes downcast. "He hurt Victoria." Lee's blood ran cold. He stared at his wife, his mind reeling. This was a lie, a blatant fabrication. But why? Why would Paisley do this? His lawyer was prepared. She presented evidence, video footage from the security cameras Lee had installed in their home, showing him caring for his children, playing with them, his love for them evident in every frame. The truth, like a ray of light piercing through the darkness, shattered the accusations. The judge, his face unreadable, listened intently to the evidence. When the time came for his verdict, a hush fell over the courtroom. "Mr. Walker," the judge began, his voice firm and clear, "the court finds in your favor. You have proven yourself to be a loving, capable father. Custody of your children is granted to you." A wave of relief washed over Lee, tears welling up in his eyes. He had won, he had his children back. The reunion was bittersweet. Months of separation had taken their toll, leaving invisible scars. Victoria, once so full of life, was withdrawn and quiet. The joy in their eyes, once so bright, seemed dimmer, clouded by the ordeal they had endured. Lee, determined to rebuild their lives, moved his family to a new town, a fresh start. He found a job with better hours, allowing him to spend more time with his children. He enrolled them in a new school, their laughter echoing through their new home, a melody that warmed his heart. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. One rainy afternoon, as Lee was driving his children home from school, tragedy struck. A drunk driver speeding through a red light slammed into their car. Lee awoke in a hospital bed, his body screaming in pain. He vaguely remembered the screech of tires, the deafening crash, the terrified cries of his children. He had survived, but at what cost? The doctors informed him that his children had escaped with minor injuries, but they were being held in protective custody until he recovered. Relief warred with frustration. He longed to hold them, to reassure them, to apologize for not being able to protect them from this. Just as he began to recover, the world plunged into chaos. The COVID-19 pandemic swept across the globe, shutting down cities, isolating individuals, and creating a barrier between Lee and his children. The hospital, overwhelmed with patients, restricted visitors. Lee was trapped, his only connection to his children through grainy video calls and the occasional phone call. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The virus raged on, an invisible enemy that kept him separated from his children, amplifying his fear and helplessness. Through it all, Lee never gave up hope. He clung to the memory of his children's laughter, the feel of their small arms around his neck, the echo of their voices calling him Daddy. He knew this separation was temporary, an obstacle to overcome. He diligently followed his physiotherapy regimen, his determination fueled by the thought of holding his children again. He spoke to them every day, sharing stories, offering words of comfort and encouragement. He reminded them that he loved them, that he would be with them soon. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the world began to heal. Restrictions eased, the virus receded, and Lee was given a clean bill of health. The day he walked out of the hospital, his children racing toward him, their arms outstretched, their faces lit up with joy, was the happiest day of his life. Life had thrown him one curveball after another, testing his strength, his resolve, his very soul. But through it all, Lee had never faltered. He had fought for his children, protected them, loved them unconditionally. He had emerged from the fire, scarred but not broken, his spirit unbroken, his bond with his children stronger than ever.